Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really central to, well, modern life. It's this challenge of confusing just being busy with actually achieving something meaningful.
Absolutely. So
Hmm.
many of us, wake up and the first thing we do is dive straight into the email inbox. The sources actually call it the tyranny of the inbox, which I think is brilliant.
It really is. You spend all day churning through tasks, ticking things off the list. You feel exhausted by the end of it, right?
Mm.
But strategically, you haven't really moved forward at all. Just motion.
That feeling of motion without meaning, it's almost universal, isn't it?
Oh.
We're sort of conditioned to think busy equals productive. But that kind of thinking, that strategic blindness, it actually stops us from gaining real agency, real control.
Yeah, if you feel overwhelmed, the sources suggest you're probably, well, doing the wrong kind of work. It doesn't matter how many hours you clock in.
Exactly.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to try and give you a framework, a way to identify the right work. You know, the high impact stuff, the effort that only you can really contribute. We'll be looking at strategies, lessons from some cultural giants,
Artists, specifically, who really nailed this idea of leverage.
right, artists, and some really powerful personal stories, too, all aimed at helping you find a more intentional way of living and working.
Okay, so where do we start? I think we first need to redefine how we even categorize the effort we put in day to day.
Yes, let's unpack that structure from Seth Godin. It divides everything we do into these three distinct buckets. And spoiler alert, most people, they spend like 90% of their time stuck in just the first one.
Right. And that first type is, well, it's the simplest. Chores and tasks. This is all the mechanical stuff. The routine, repeatable work we basically hire ourselves to do. Clearing emails, running standard reports, filing, the drill.
Stuff that needs doing, definitely. But it's predictable. You get that quick satisfaction of completion.
Exactly. But it doesn't really move the needle on your big goals, does it?
Hmm.
The real danger here, the sources say, is that we actually hide in these tasks. We retreat into the comfort of the routine to avoid, well, the harder stuff, true responsibility.
That's a wake-up call, isn't it? Realizing your whole day is just tasks. That's stagnation right there.
Yeah,
These are the things you have to do, maybe, but they're rarely the things that actually drive growth.
which brings us to the second category, leverage. This is where strategy starts to creep in.
Okay, leverage. What does that look like?
Leverage is basically the work you actively find ways to not do yourself. You outsource it, automate it, delegate it. Doing this forces you to think smarter about your resources, yes, but more importantly, it forces you to define your unique contribution.
So asking yourself, what's the work only I can do? The work that generates enough value to justify someone else handling the chores.
Precisely. It demands a real shift in how you see yourself, moving from being the technician doing the task to being the architect designing the system.
Okay, tasks, leverage. And then there's the third one, the mountain peak, as you called it, the one everyone tries to avoid.
Yeah, emotional labor. This is the really difficult stuff, the high-stakes work. It's about change, making tough decisions, setting strategy. It means dealing with ambiguity, leading when you don't have all the answers.
Implementing real change, which is often, let's face it, painful.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And what really defines emotional labor is that you have to be willing to embrace, well, incompetence, at least temporarily. If you're learning something new, setting a risky new direction, having that difficult conversation, you're doing work you haven't mastered yet, by definition.
And that takes vulnerability, right? It risks failure, public failure sometimes.
And the sources argue the deep psychological cost of avoiding this work is huge. For organizations, it's drift. For individuals, it's just stagnation. We become perfectionists, maybe, using that need for everything to be flawless as a shield against taking the risk.
We retreat into the comfortable rhythm of tasks, like you said, hiding in busyness. It keeps us occupied, makes us feel needed. But ultimately, we're stuck. But the sources remind us, I think Simon Sinek is mentioned here, that progress is just so much more important than perfection.
That's the key. If you're not making mistakes, if you're not failing sometimes, you're probably not doing the hard emotional labor required for real growth.
Okay, so that framework is really clear. Tasks, leverage, emotional labor.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how this plays out not just in business, but like we mentioned, in creative fields too. It's fascinating how some really successful artists instinctively got this. They understood that the mechanics of creating could often be treated like a chore, something to leverage.
Well, the vision, the core idea, that was the emotional labor. That was the part only they could do.
Exactly. Think about Rembrandt or Andy Warhol, or even contemporary artists like Keandre Wiley.
Right. They created massive culture-shifting art. But hang on, they built huge studios, didn't they? They hired assistants, craftspeople. Sometimes they even had others do the actual painting. Doesn't that feel a bit off? Like, don't we value the artist's direct touch? How do the sources explain that?
That's a really good question, and it cuts right to the heart of what real leverage is about. They recognize that putting paint on canvas, that could be a task. Their unique, irreplaceable contribution was the vision, the decision-making.
Ah, okay. So the emotional labor wasn't the brushstroke itself.
Not necessarily. The sources suggest these artists were definitely paying their dues, but maybe not just with technique. There's that quote, I think, from Sophia Loren, "Mistakes are part of the dues one pays for a full life." Their emotional labor was the strategy.
Answering those scary, open-ended questions. What style are we creating here? Who do I trust to help execute this? And the big one, is this good enough to release into the world?
Yes. Those decisions carry enormous risk, professional, reputational, which is exactly why most of us retreat to clearing the inbox. Zero risk there.
So their genius was identifying their unique gift, the vision, and then ruthlessly leveraging everything else. The moment they signed it, the vision, the emotional labor was theirs.
It really underscores that strategy is about drawing a line around your unique value and then finding ways to outsource or delegate what falls outside that line. If you cling to doing all the mechanical bits yourself, you're likely avoiding the much riskier but more valuable work of creation and strategy.
Okay, so vision helps us delegate mechanical tasks. That makes sense. But the sources take it a step further, right? Talking about how strategic vision helps us manage or even delegate emotional tasks, specifically dealing with the limitations or opinions of others.
Exactly. This moves into the realm of personal agency, and it requires profound emotional labor. We so often let what other people think or do become a task for us to manage. It forces us into reacting all the time.
Instead of acting.
Right. And the sources use this incredibly powerful story about a young Condoleezza Rice to illustrate strategic thinking applied to, well, human dignity.
Yeah, I remember reading that one from Ryan Holiday's Daily Dad. It's striking. She's 13. She comes home completely heartbroken because a classmate refused to sit next to her, moved their seat away because she was black. You'd expect a parent maybe to focus on comforting her, or maybe outrage.
But her father's response was different. It was strategic. He gave her agency. The source calls it pretty counterintuitive advice.
Yeah.
He basically told her, look, it's okay that some closed-minded person doesn't want to sit next to you.
As long as they're the one that moves. Wow.
Powerful, isn't it?
It completely reframes it. Dignity isn't just something you have, it's something you choose strategically. She couldn't control the other kid's prejudice, no way, but she could absolutely control her response. Her power was in deciding not to be moved, not to be bent by it.
She didn't have to take on the task of managing that person's ignorance or feelings.
Exactly. They move. She doesn't have to do a thing. That's where her power lies.
And making that choice not to be moved, to define yourself rather than react, that is really high-level emotional labor. It means choosing your own long-term identity over a short-term reaction. It means recognizing fear, because prejudice is scary. Recognizing fear tells you something's wrong, but not letting it paralyze you.
The sources link this to leadership too, right? Whether leading others or just leading your own life. Standing up when things get tough, refusing to be defined or victimized by external forces.
And the payoff for claiming that independence, it's huge. There's a quote from Osho in the material, something like, "The greatest fear is the opinion of others. The moment you are unafraid of the crowd, you are no longer a sheep, you are a lion. A great roar rises in your heart, the roar of freedom."
Wow. That roar comes from refusing to let others' limitations dictate your strategic position, refusing to be moved.
And this internal strength, this commitment to agency, it naturally leads us to maybe the most fundamental emotional labor we face every single day, which is how we choose to treat other people and, crucially, how we choose to see the world around us.
Okay, let's talk about that. The golden rule comes up. Do to others what you would have them do to you. The source material, I think Kevin Kelly argues it's infallible because it demands emotional labor. Why is that? Why is it so hard?
Well, because it demands restraint, doesn't it? It forces you to hit pause on your immediate reaction, your self-interest.
Yeah.
You have to do this uncomfortable thing of projecting yourself forward, thinking about the consequences.
Yeah.
You have to actively choose empathy over, say, immediate payback or just convenience.
That effort, that sustained choice of restraint and empathy, the sources say that's the bedrock of all other virtues.
It seems so. And sometimes, making a difference doesn't need some grand strategy. Mandy Hale is quoted saying, "It just requires that we care. Even something as simple as smiling, the sources suggest, is like basic piecework.
Small, intentional acts of emotional labor, they add up. They define our character day to day.
And this ties everything together, really. Strategy, vision, dignity, empathy. The emotional labor of living strategically requires us to look beyond our immediate circumstances and instead look inward at how we are perceiving them.
So practically speaking, what does that look like? How do we actually do this high-level emotional work, the vision, the empathy, when we're facing the same stresses, the same inbox every day? There's a quote from Marcel Proust that seems key here. Something about the real voyage of discovery.
Yeah, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It means we need to stop constantly looking for a new job or a new situation, or blaming our circumstances.
And instead choose to see the circumstances we're already in differently.
Right. Challenge our default assumptions. Is that layoff only a tragedy? Or could it also be a necessary market correction or a chance to refocus? Is that difficult client only a drain? Or is it maybe an opportunity to practice setting firm boundaries, which is crucial emotional labor itself?
Having new eyes.
Okay, so reframing the tyranny of the inbox, maybe not as just an obligation, but as a structure you need to manage to protect your strategic time. It means consciously pushing back against our comfortable default ways of seeing things.
And that deliberate choice to see differently, that might be the ultimate ongoing emotional labor. But, and this is a big but, knowing isn't doing. Stephen Covey puts it bluntly, to learn and not do is not to learn.
Ouch. So if you listen to all this today, absorb the ideas, but don't actually act on it. Like, delegate one task you shouldn't be doing, or consciously choose not to react to someone's opinion, or try to reframe a frustrating situation.
Then it's just more information. Another form of, ironically, busy work for your brain, knowledge that action doesn't change anything.
Which brings us to that final, really simple directive from the sources. It's both literal and metaphorical, I think. Sit less, move more. Yeah, stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or for someone else to make the first move. Actively step into the emotional labor you know you've been avoiding. Make the decision. Have the conversation. Start the project.
Okay, so let's recap. We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about moving past just chores and tasks towards that high-impact emotional labor and using leverage smartly.
We looked at how artists like Warhol modeled this, prioritizing their unique vision over just the mechanical execution.
And that powerful lesson in agency from the Condoleezza Rice story, recognizing that true strategic power often lies in choosing not to be moved by others' limitations.
The core idea really is that strategic practice is a daily choice.
Yeah.
It's choosing the hard, important, emotional labor over the easy, comfortable, busy work. Remember, they can move. You don't have to.
So we want to leave you with that critical question the source material poses, something to really chew on and, more importantly, act on. What is the work that only you can do, and why are you avoiding it?
Really think about that. Take that question with you and maybe start your own voyage of discovery by applying just one piece of this today.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.